Welcome back to the deep dive.
Good to be here.
So today, we're digging into something pretty specific but really revealing. The shift from NotePerformer 4 to NotePerformer 5.
Yeah, the developer actually put out a statement explaining the why behind it, which gives us a great look into, the kinds of challenges software companies face, especially in audio.
Exactly. And the core issue, it seems, was trouble with VST3 plugins in NotePerformer 4.
Mm. That's the standard format for virtual instruments, effects, lots of things. If you use music software, you've likely dealt with VSTs and maybe some headaches from them.
Oh, definitely. So our mission today is really to understand why they made the switch and what it actually means for people using notation software and sample libraries.
Right. Let's get into the problems with NotePerformer 4 first. The developer was pretty clear.
What kind of things were happening?
Well, they listed quite a few. Things like erratic behavior, just unpredictable stuff, background crashes.
The worst kind.
Exactly. Sound dropping out when you try to export your track bounce mode issues.
Yeah.
Problems streaming samples from the hard drive.
Okay, so performance hits.
Yeah, and even preset version mismatches. Crucially, they stressed these weren't really NotePerformer bugs per se. They were issues stemming from the third-party VST3 plugins themselves.
Wow, okay. That sounds like a support nightmare, trying to fix problems that aren't even technically yours.
Absolutely. They mentioned some support cases taking like 20-plus emails just for one user, one plugin.
20 emails.
Yeah, and think about that from a business angle. They're trying to offer this software affordably, say $89, but spending huge amounts of time troubleshooting other companies' plugins.
And getting blamed if it doesn't work.
That's what they implied, yeah.
Yeah.
Chargebacks for issues they couldn't fix. It's just not sustainable, acting as unofficial support for the entire VST3 ecosystem.
Yeah, that puts things in perspective. It highlights that tension, doesn't it, between open platforms and who's responsible when things go wrong.
Totally.
Okay.
So faced with this, they basically saw two paths forward.
Which were?
Option one, just drop VST3 support entirely.
Ouch. That would limit users quite a bit.
For sure. Option two, create some kind of controlled environment, a sandboxed solution.
Okay, sandboxing, like keeping things separate and safer.
Exactly. And that path led directly to NotePerformer 5 and its different approach.
Right, the emulation approach. How
Yeah.
does that actually function?
So instead of running the original VST3 plugin directly, NotePerformer 5 runs its own emulation of compatible sample libraries.
An emulation, like a copy.
Sort of, but a highly simplified one. It uses a custom high-stability engine designed to be really light, low CPU, low RAM usage, and importantly, no direct disk streaming of those massive library files.
Okay, so you go from, say, a huge 1,000 gigabyte library.
Down to maybe 5 gigabytes within the NotePerformer 5 emulation, yeah.
There have got to be trade-offs there, surely. You can't shrink something that much without losing detail.
Absolutely. That's the key compromise. The emulation involves significant simplification. They had to streamline the content, handle things like transitions between notes and release trails in their own custom way.
So it won't sound identical to the original high-detail library?
It won't. That's the trade-off. You lose some of that sonic nuance, that ultimate fidelity.
What do you gain? Why make that trade?
Reliability and consistency. That's the big win. Especially in notation software, which, let's be honest, can sometimes be a bit finicky.
Sure.
And it potentially opens up access. People with less powerful computers or less storage might be able to use sounds they couldn't before, albeit in this emulated form.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, emulation. That word can sometimes raise eyebrows regarding intellectual property. How are they handling that?
Yeah, sensitive topic. The developer was careful to address this. They state clearly, no actual IP, no sound data is being transferred or copied.
So how does it work securely?
The emulations are hardware encrypted specifically to the user's local system. And there's a level of validation it checks if you actually have the original VST3 plugin content, if your subscription is active, a dongle is present, that kind of thing.
So it checks that you own the original.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
It's not super tight security like iLock. They admit that. But they feel it's appropriate for their specific use case within notation software.
And are they working with the original library developers on this?
They say they are, or at least they're willing to. They've offered to disable the factory engine for any library if the developer requests it, and even blacklist the VST3 identifier so it can't be used with NotePerformer 5 at all.
So trying to be cooperative.
Yeah, the stated goal isn't to force libraries into the system, but to provide a stable experience within the notation context. They did add a note, though.
Oh.
That if major legal concerns arise from developers, they might have to rethink VST3 compatibility more broadly. But they really hope it's seen as a win-win. easier use for notation users while still respecting the original library developers.
Right. So wrapping this up then, the switch to NotePerformer 5 and emulation seems like it was fundamentally driven by stability issues.
Pretty much. The headaches and support costs of direct VST3 integration just became too much.
So the trade-off is accepting a potentially less detailed sound through emulation in exchange for much better reliability and ease of use within the notation software.
That sums it up nicely. It's a pragmatic solution to a complex problem.
And it definitely makes you ponder, doesn't it? This
Yeah.
balance between open, flexible systems and more controlled, perhaps more stable environments in creative tech.
It really does. It shows the hidden complexities behind getting different pieces of software to just work together smoothly, something we often take for granted.
A fascinating look behind the scenes. Thanks for breaking that down.
My pleasure.